Welcome back to the Money Wisdom Podcast, hosted by Johnson Bernetti. My name is Jake Dozer. I'm a certified financial planner and one of the advisors on the team here in our Connecticut offices. And with us, of course, is my colleague and partner in crime, Nick Colantuono. Nick, introduce yourself if you would.
Jake, thank you for teeing that up. Folks, my name is Nick Colantuono. I'm a certified financial planner up here in our Boston offices at Johnson Bernetti. Happy to be back with you, Jake, and back with all of our awesome listeners today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the subject that we have in front of us today. We're looking at a question that was sent in. We call these our mailbag episodes. And the question we have in front of us is one I really want to explore. And I think it's a question we hear a lot. Before we hop into it, I do want to mention for those who are watching and listening is that they can find this information and how to watch this video in the show notes of our podcast. And so if you like this content and find that it's helpful, be sure to like the page, be sure to subscribe to our content. And if you know somebody that may be approaching retirement or in retirement and they would find this helpful too, be sure to share it. And again, you can find that information in the show notes of today's video. But without further ado, let's look at that question we have in front of us today. So the question was, I have about $120,000 in a bank account and I'm getting some interest, and it's more than I was getting a couple years ago, which I'm sure many people can attest to, but it's still not all that much interest. So the question is there somewhere or something that I can do with this money that's just as safe and liquid as the bank, but I can earn more interest? I think that's a reasonable question, and it's a question we hear a lot. But Nick, why don't you start us off and give some ideas for our listeners of what options they could have in front of them?
Yeah, Jake, you're absolutely right. I mean, at the end of the day, we work solely in retirement planning, which, as you know, a lot of our clients are now savers, right? And in this higher interest rate environment where traditionally higher interest rates hurt borrowers, here we are with higher interest rates actually helping our clients, those who are saving. Right. So when it comes to this question of how can I just squeeze a little more juice out of some of this, maybe kind of stagnant money or, cash in the bank is almost what I call like non-performing money. How do you do that in a way where you can keep it as liquid, yet just, again, squeeze a little more juice, get a little higher rate of return out of it? But I think the question before exploring alternatives to cash is really exploring the why, right? What do you want that money to exactly be doing for you? Because the purpose of having cash in the bank is for it to be liquid, for it to be safe, for it to be that sort of sleep at night money. But obviously you want it to work as hard for you as you've worked for it. And that's where a lot of folks are coming in with this question, as we see in the mailbag this week, of how to get a little more yield. So I think it really comes down to the purpose of what you want this money to do for you. Obviously, this is not a question of how to double this money as quickly as possible. It's just earning a little more. So, why don't you talk about some of the alternatives, things that we're seeing in maybe brokerage accounts or other sort of bank or maybe even insurance products, other things that live in the safe world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you hit the nail on the head, is we have to align the bucket of money with purpose. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, your goal, it sounds like, is Mr. and Mrs. Client, is to keep this money safe. Well, the first question we have to ask is, all right, is $120,000 the right number? So I would be asking, okay, do you really need $120,000 in the bank? Now, certainly there are instances where you would. So I'm thinking of, hey, I know I've got an emergency fund, and I know maybe this money is in excess of my emergency fund, but maybe I have it earmarked for an upcoming roof repair. Maybe I have it earmarked for a car I'm about to buy, a trip I'm about to take. Maybe I'm earmarking this for a specific purchase, whatever it may be. Well, if that's the case, then this amount of money is not of concern. If this amount of money is a majority of your assets, all right, well, now you've got too much money safe. So now we need to step back from product recommendation and more say, I don't know that this amount of money is appropriate for your overall scenario. Or if you say, look, that's just the amount of money that keeps my head on the pillow at night, then my response to that person would be like, how long would it realistically take for you to use this money before it was burned out? If it's more than a year or two, that's probably too much money in the bank. And it doesn't mean that you have to swing the pendulum too far and say, I'm not keeping any money in the bank. No, having money is good. Generally, you want to keep anywhere from 6 to 12 months worth of expenses or a minimum of 30 or 40 grand in the bank. But beyond that, we need to align purpose with product. And so with that foundation being laid, and I just sort of wanted to accentuate what you said, Nick, I think the next question is, okay, what are other options? Well, if you're looking to keep it safe and liquid, really cash is an option. A money market fund, which can be effectively cash, could be an option. That's typically what's called a core account in a brokerage account. Think of a brokerage account as, a bank account that holds investments instead of cash. And effectively, that means it's liquid and it can hold investments, but it can just hold cash alternatives like a money market fund. Some of those are government guaranteed. Some of them aren't, but are real close to it. And then finally, maybe short-term CDs are appropriate. If your goal is safe, liquid, I'm using this short-term. Maybe you're getting a 6 or 12-month CD and know that, yes, I'd get a penalty to access it. But typically with CDs, when you get a penalty, you're losing interest. You're not losing principal. So it is liquid for all intents and purposes. Obviously, a combination thereof is appropriate for most folks. Again, you normally want 6 to 12 months worth of expenses or a minimum of 30 or 40 grand in cash. And then anything else would be, okay, now we're looking at maybe time commitment products such as CDs, maybe progressing. Nick, you mentioned it. Is there some insurance products out there? One of the most basic versions is a fixed annuity where you're giving a guaranteed rate of return for a fixed period of time. Sounds very similar to some of the other things we mentioned. Now, in those products, you typically can't access all or even a majority of the money. Normally, you can only touch the interest or maybe sometimes up to 10% per year. So those are appropriate alternatives if your time horizon is maybe 3 to 5 years. Beyond that, you're getting into the scope of, all right, anything past 5 years is really more of a medium to long-term time commitment or a medium to long-term objective. And now we're going back to that original conversation is, do you really need this much money long-term, or do you want to pivot towards where does this align in my greater overarching plan?
Yep.
That's really where I would put. Nick, what else would you say? What other things should be people consider?
Yeah, I mean, just generally speaking, at least a lot of the clients that we're seeing up here in kind of the greater Boston area, $120,000 in the bank, that's a lot of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you eventually become a point where it's like you are the bank, right? The bank is taking your money and loaning it out to other people, and they're charging you with a tax bill at the end of the year for the, pennies of interest that you earn. So, be aware of that. I understand we've all got good relationships with our banks and our local credit union, but believe me, they're not doing you any favors, and you shouldn't be doing them too many favors either. It's a lot of cash to have in the bank, and a lot of people right now have a lot of cash because there's a lot of red flags out there on the horizon. So when we're trying to achieve this balance of safety but getting growth and being tax efficient, money in the bank is good for the safety, not really good for the growth, not really good for the tax efficient piece of that either. So it's all about creating a plan. And, unfortunately, so many people are in a position where they should have their dream retirement. They should have zero concerns about money or, making sure that their accounts are doing the right things. But we find that so many people, at least initially, when they come in and meet with us, and there's just it's never really a lack of money, right? It's usually just a lack of a plan. And once you have that plan, that's where you really get the clarity and the confidence that you need to get to this next phase of life.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And, sometimes you guys up there in Massachusetts, you have an idea or two that I like. I don't, not all the time, but no, I'm just teasing. But, I think that this is an excellent opportunity. Really, I think what we identified here is that a lack of options in products is not the issue. It's a lack of alignment with the overarching plan. Is how much money is the right amount of money to be safe? Yes, there is a balance between the dollars and cents answer and the psychology answer, but there's a tension in the middle that we have to find. And so with that being
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that there's a resource that we can provide our listeners that would be a great place to get the ball rolling on that piece. And so we have a book that Joel Johnson, our managing partner, wrote years ago, and I think it would be effective. It's called the Money Map book, and it really helps understand what are the rudimentary pieces to building a plan. So if those who are listening today would like to get their hands on that, you can text the word MAP to 800-757-0436. Again, text the word MAP to 800-757-0436. Again, that info is down in the show notes. I hope that you enjoyed today's money wisdom question. Like, share, and subscribe if you find it helpful. We'll see you next time.
In Investment advisory services offered through JB Capital LLC. Insurance products offered through JN Financial LLC.